read the whole book of Jeremiah.
Some of it.
Some of it. So if you was going to give Jeremiah a theme, what would you give the theme of the whole book? Not just the different parts, but what's the whole book of really the theme? Oh, I thought that was something that was under attack, Tim. That's all right. I need to do that too, but I'm not going to.
Came up with it's preaching to me.
Yeah.
Several things, I guess, come to mind.
I'm only looking for
Forgot,
one.
forgot God and came back. God remembered him. In God's time.
There was, the theme is actually twofold. One is if you do right, God will take care of you. If you do wrong, the other way. Now, the thing about Jeremiah is not just about Judah and Israel and Jerusalem. Jeremiah also prophesies against Babylon, against a country that is yet to be mentioned, which some people think is Rome, that was going to rise up, be very powerful, and fall. But we start out with Jeremiah getting to cold water, or mud actually. Getting to a lot of mud. Now, I've decided not to read anything, but simply because I want to talk about it. If you guys haven't read it, I'm sorry, but I was hoping you guys would. Because there's just too much to cover if we start reading things. But Jeremiah gets thrown into the well for his preaching. Now, to think about this, none of us can imagine what Jerusalem was going through at the time Jeremiah was doing his preaching. They were under siege. Now, none of us has ever lived through a siege. Have we? Has anybody? Were you starvation? Remember one of the things that happened during this siege? You remember the story of the two women? They made an agreement. One was going to eat the child of one woman one day. There was probably more than one day apart. And the child of the second woman the next day. They did the first one, but the second one wouldn't hit her child. That's how desperate the people were in Jerusalem. I mean, they were literally eating one another. There's no telling exactly what all goes on in a besieged city. But we do know from the tales of other places in history that it's very terrible. We are very blessed if none of us has ever had to do that. Now, there's maybe some places in the world that have experienced similar situations as a whole community, where a group of military people have went in and utterly destroyed or got them to the point where they were actually starving to death. So the mindset of the people of Jerusalem is that one of that, very desperate, hungry. They're in a lot of pain. They're surrounded by an enemy that they have been told by Jeremiah that's not going to give up because they did not do what was right. And even then, Jeremiah keeps preaching, if you just turn around, this will go away. It will go away if you just do, instead of saying, okay, maybe we need to think about this, they throw him in a cistern. Now somebody helps him out, and he gets out of the cistern and he gets somehow gets in the royal court. Some of this stuff is kind of like back and forth. It's almost like it's what you read after this is really something that was over here and vice versa. So I don't think there's any chronological order in this, but to suffice to know, we do know from history, not just from here, but from history, Jerusalem was destroyed. And the temple was destroyed. Now think about the temple. Everybody read about the building of the temple, what it took to build the temple. It's a pretty good structure. I mean, it would probably take some pretty good hits from some of our modern weapons and still, they burned it to the ground. There was nothing left of it because that's what God wanted to happen. So here's a question. Think about where Israel was. They go through to the wilderness, they come up, and they go through the judges, they come to the kings, they have the tabernacle, and then they go to the temple worship. Solomon builds this beautiful temple that has all this stuff. there's no telling. I figured it up one time. It's over like almost $500 million our money to build that temple. And it was not a big, like, I don't think it's as big as this building. But it's a pretty good structure. There was a lot of gold, and a lot of ornate things, so very beautiful. And now, these people see it completely destroyed. And then, the ones who survive are shackled and taken to Babylon. And Jeremiah is still preaching. If you turn around, this will go away. And they go, how can this change? He says, 70 years, there'll be people back. There'll be remnant that comes back. And we know that happened. We also know that the temple's rebuilt, sometime later during the time of King Herod. One thing that stopped, they completely stopped at that time in Israelite worship. Does anybody know what it was? Other than temple worship. Well, actually it came back during the time of Herod. Sacrifices. I know you read about some of them in the time of Jesus, but they weren't the bulls and the goats and all that stuff. They were just doves and sparrows, stuff like that, small stuff. They didn't have the big 100,000 animal sacrifices like they did during the time of Solomon, and even some times after that. So that was the first destruction of the temple. Was complete. The big sacrifices were gone. The second time destruction of the temple in AD 70, the sacrifice was completely eliminated. Now, say, well, what's that got to do with Jeremiah? Jeremiah predicted all this stuff. He said it's going to happen. He talked about things that were going to happen in just the immediate future, and then things that were going to happen even to Babylon. I mean, think about this. He was predicting the fall of Babylon, and it was huge. It was a mighty empire. I don't know. All the whole known world was under Babylon control at this time. And he's predicting the downfall of this great nation. And then another nation that was going to rise up. Now, Daniel also does the same thing. Predicts about the downfalls of nations. Now, what's the one thing all these nations have in common? The downfall. Idol worship. Okay. Including Israel, right? They did the same exact thing. Now, they thought they could get away with it because they still had the temple. Because one of the reasons I believe God had the temple destroyed was to say it's not the temple. It has nothing to do with the temple. It's your relationship with me, not with the building. That's the reason. And the last time he destroyed it, it was actually fulfillment of prophecy. Some people will argue this point. When Jesus talked about the temple being destroyed in 3 days, I'll raise it up. What was destroyed? And he was raised up. Both things happened. Just not the way everybody, but it did happen, right? And ever since then, there's only the sacrifice that he made. There's no more sacrifice. Even Israel doesn't do it anymore. You'd think that when they was reestablished in 1947 and things got better, they would have reestablished, their religious stuff, but they didn't do it. So, anyway, that's old history, medium history, and new history. But the one thing that I think is this book of Jeremiah really, really points out is that nations have to have God involved with all the running of the nation. Whenever you do something, you have to have, your leadership has to have God in their lives. The leadership has to have, understand that who's in control. The leadership has to use God's instructions on how to lead, how to manage, how to supervise, how to do everything. There's all sorts of things that we could get out of the Old Testament. A lot of times we, as Christians, think the Old Testament doesn't apply to us. Why do we think that?